Coming up on the show, the unrest in Los Angeles having a ripple effect right here in Atlanta. We're going to get the president of the Georgia NAACP's take on what needs to be done to ease the tension. Plus, an Atlanta police officer is being hailed a hero for his part in bringing end to a shooting in a downtown food court. And what's behind the Georgia Tech's creation of what's being called the Next Generation Innovation District. This is the take. Let's go. Hello and welcome. I'm Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines and we look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite the experts in to share their take as well. They have all the expertise, folks, and we try to have a little bit of fun as well. All right, let's start you off with that tension, the high tension in Los Angeles over immigration raids, which turned violent over the weekend. On Monday, President Donald Trump sent another 2,000 National Guardsmen along with 700 Marines to protect federal law enforcement officers and property in greater Los Angeles. This in addition to about 1,000 National Guard members already deployed. More than 70 arrests have been made as of Monday afternoon in connection with the demonstrations. President Trump even suggesting that he would be willing to have California Governor Gavin Newsom arrested by the border czar if his administration obstructed ICE operations.
I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing. The people that are causing the problem are professional agitators. They're insurrectionists. They're bad people. They should be in jail.
As tensions rise in Los Angeles over President Trump's new immigration policies, folks here in Atlanta are joining in the fight. Yesterday, union workers gathered outside the office of the Inspector General in Atlanta, protesting immigration raids and standing in solidarity with demonstrators out west. At least one more local demonstration is planned for later on today. Joining us now is Gerald Griggs, the president of Georgia's NAACP. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Good to be with you.
All right. Give us your initial reaction to what's taking place right now in Los Angeles.
My initial reaction is I've been watching the live stream of a mostly peaceful protest over the illegal detentions of immigrants who are trying to make a living in this country. And I'm concerned of the rhetoric that the President of the United States is using to incite. Here, what you have is individuals who are using their First Amendment protected rights, and we have an over-militarization of the response. I think local law enforcement can contain the mostly peaceful protests and allow people to exercise their First Amendment rights. Been watching the live stream. Yes, we've seen some cars that have been damaged. I'm sure those individuals were arrested. But other than that, you've seen peaceful protests, and we should promote that and not try to silence it.
Yeah, we've seen the government deploy troops without the state's approval. Haven't seen something like that in over 60 years. How do you see that? What's your take on that?
It's concerning. You know, I'm not a staunch advocate for states' rights, but we have to remember the Constitution and the 10th Amendment reserves all powers not expressly given to the federal government to the states. You have a state that's able to maintain the general welfare. The mayor and the governor has said they don't need the help of the National Guard or federal troops. And so it's concerning to see we're going backwards 60 years in a case where you have a contained protest that is mostly peaceful.
Do you think similar moves like that could ever be attempted here in Georgia?
We've seen similar moves like this attempted in Georgia, not by the President of the United States, but by the governor in response to the George Floyd protests. And again, those protests were mainly peaceful, and there's no need for that type of militarization. Local law enforcement can maintain crowd control and peace while people use their First Amendment rights. And so we stand in solidarity with all the families that are dealing with these mass deportations, the citizens who are being detained. I believe there was a union president who was out there monitoring the protests. He was detained. We have some serious due process issues that are happening in our country right now, and we really need to be able to exercise our First Amendment rights without fear of repression.
You talked about standing in solidarity. Talk to me about the solidarity between immigration rights and civil rights, movement right here in Metro Atlanta.
It's always been in solidarity. The very first protest over on Buford Highway, I was there, and many of African-American community were there to stand in solidarity with our brown brothers and sisters who are being disproportionately affected by this. What we have to remember is this is a rare occasion to use expedited removals. Typically, you have due process. I think that's what a lot of people are upset about. You have people that have been targeted at churches, people that have been targeted at work, people that have been targeted just merely for going around in the street. And you have people living in fear, mainly people here who are looking for a better life and provide a better opportunity for their children. That's what this country was born out of. We are a nation of immigrants. And so for us to say that certain individuals who have come over here and not been afforded due process is okay, that's un-American.
How can the NAACP on the local level get involved?
We can get involved by supporting the local peaceful protests, by lobbying our elected officials to do more on the state and local level, and to make sure that these immigration operations operate under the law. I don't see the need for mass individuals going into people's homes, sometimes without a warrant, and snatching people up, putting them in detention facilities, or even shipping them to off-site facilities that are outside the country before they have their day in court. That is un-American, and I think all of the units in the Georgia State Conference should either say something or be a part of the peaceful, nonviolent protest, while also contacting their local elected officials to make sure that doesn't happen in our community.
Gerald, it seems as if we are, if not at a boiling point, we're certainly getting closer to it. How can emotions be calmed down, if at all?
Well, first and foremost, the President of the United States should never be threatening to arrest the governor. We are not at that point. These protests are mainly contained to a small neighborhood in Los Angeles. Let's remember, Los Angeles is the size of Gwinnett County. And so if there is one neighborhood in Gwinnett County that has some type of peaceful protest, some of which may have some property damage, you don't need the National Guard and the Army and the Marines going in there. What you need is local law enforcement to make sure it maintains peaceful with general welfare of the citizens, to arrest those that are agitating or doing things to destroy property. But you don't need the President of the United States inflaming this for some type of political circus. So I think what needs to happen is cooler heads need to prevail. If he was to arrest the governor of the state, that would put us in a situation we haven't been in 150 years. Nobody wants to see that. Everyone should abide by the Constitution. The Constitution grants certain rights to the local and state government. The federal government needs to stay out of it.
Gerald Griggs, president of the Georgia NAACP, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your insight.
Thank you for having me.
All right. All right, let's take a look at our 7-day outlook today, and it does show that we have a chance for more thunderstorms to pop up in the area. In fact, the Storm Prediction Center has just now placed the metro area in a level 1 threat for severe weather. That's a marginal risk. That means isolated strong severe thunderstorms could be possible in the area. If we see that, I think it'll be after 1 o'clock this afternoon that those will start to develop in the area. So we'll continue to watch it and let you know what's going to happen in our area. Of course, it stays unsettled as we head through the rest of the week. In fact, we'll see that chance for rain going up as we head into the upcoming weekend. Hey, don't go anywhere. You're watching The Take, and we'll be back right after this. All right, welcome back to the show. The violent reaction to the recent ICE raids has become a nasty war of words between President Donald Trump and California Governor Gavin Newsom. Joining us now is Chris Palone, live in Washington, D.C. And Chris, California leaders are calling the military deployment a provocation. How are local leaders or our local officials pushing back? And is there any legal ground for getting the Marines out of there?
Yeah, Chesley, that's the big question, is whether this move by the Trump administration to send not only National Guard members, but also active duty Marines to a U.S. city without the approval or the request of a state's governor is actually legal. The state of California has sued in federal court. Now, we haven't seen any movement in that lawsuit so far, but they are testing that limit. They are seeing whether they do indeed have the right to force the federal government basically to pull these troops back. But that will wind its way through the courts. Who knows? The situation may be resolved before this is even resolved by the courts. But officials in California certainly believe that this move by the Trump administration is illegal, that the provision that the White House has used in order to justify sending these troops, the conditions have not been met under the statute that the White House is using.
Have we heard from the Pentagon on the buildup without California's request? Did they respond to this at all?
Well, we will today. You know, the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, is testifying before a subcommittee coming up in about 20 minutes here, and no doubt he will face questions. But because he is the president's hand-selected defense secretary, the Pentagon has been working in lockstep with the White House in order to carry out these moves.
So there hasn't been any friction between them at all, right? Or you haven't heard of any?
it doesn't appear to be at this point, no. And you know, the White House behind the scenes has been telling reporters that they've kind of been spoiling for this fight. They enjoy this back and forth, kind of imposing their will on what's known as blue state governor, blue state governor, and a blue state mayor, whose immigration policies they disagree with.
Wow. All right, let's touch a little bit on the ICE operations being carried out. How is this fueling the protests, and has there been any reports of raids near schools or other sensitive locations?
The mayor of Los Angeles mentioned something about schools. We do know that when this all started last week, one of the large areas that one of the raids took place was at a clothing manufacturer in LA's fashion district. A lot of migrants were pulled from that business, and that business is searching for answers as to why they were targeted. We also know that there was some activity at a Home Depot in the Los Angeles area where day laborers were waiting to be picked up for work. The federal government says that they were just staging in that area and that wasn't an actual raid. But other information about where these raids, where people are being picked up, is anecdotal at best.
Okay. All right. So, Chris, the White House is saying that this military presence is all about restoring order, but critics are saying it's political. How is this playing out on Capitol Hill, and could it escalate any further, do you think?
Well, it's somewhat, divided along party lines, where you had the Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries saying that, the White House has no credibility on law and order. A lot of people are pointing to January 6th, where, the Capitol was being attacked, and this type of response certainly was not called for at that point by the Trump administration. And now you look at Los Angeles, where, these protests are taking in a very limited area in the downtown area of Los Angeles. It's a big, sprawling city, and people who live there, if they don't go to downtown, wouldn't know that this was going on. And yet you've got now some 4,000 National Guard troops that are being called out, and 700 Marines, nearly 5,000 military members being called to augment both county and local police departments for skirmishes that really are not that big in the grand scheme of what's happened in Los Angeles in the last 20 or 30 years. So, there's certainly a divide here on Capitol Hill whether this show of force is necessary.
Gotcha. All right, Chris Palone, Washington, D.C. Really appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us. All right, there's plenty more stories for you ahead, folks, including how bad those debt collection calls are here in Georgia. You want to stick around for this. This is The Take. Well, it seems like Georgia is getting its fair share of those unwanted phone calls. A new report shows that our state ranks at the very top when it comes to a surge in debt collection calls. Wow, here to explain why the Peach State is in the sight of aggressive collectors is Thomas Nitchi. He is the Vice President of Public Relations at Money Management International, which is behind the report. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Chesley. Thanks
All right,
for having us.
let's start off with the simplest question. What's up with Atlanta? Why here? Why are we at the top?
Yeah, exactly. Well, typically you're getting collection calls when accounts are starting to fall past due, right? It could either be the original creditor that's contacting you or a third-party debt collector, a collection agency that the debt's been sold to. Typically those are a little more aggressive with the collection calls. You might be getting those all times of day and, trying to get payment on a debt that's older. In the state of Georgia, they have up to 6 years to collect on a debt before it reaches the statute of limitations. So that gives them quite a bit of time to make collection activities, including those annoying phone calls that you might get for outstanding debt.
Are we just seeing here the very high levels of unpaid debt, or is it something unique about the collectors operation here in Georgia?
I think it's just reflective of what the data showed. It was based on complaints to the Federal Trade Commission. So people might just be more likely to file that complaint in the area. It's hard telling all the indicators behind the data, but we did see here at MMI that there has been a significant, about a 30% year-over-year increase in the number of Georgians seeking financial counseling, primarily with help repaying back unsecured debt. We've also seen an increase in the average debt that they're carrying, up about 6% year-over-year, as well as an 8% increase in housing and living expenses. So when people start feeling stressed financially, it's usually those unsecured debts that go unpaid first. Obviously, as you prioritize your expenses, if you're stressed financially, you're trying to keep a roof over your head, keep food on the table, and keep your transportation going. And so things like unsecured debt or other debts that are less prioritized in people's budgets will start to fall behind. But that doesn't mean that the debt collectors can't take action to collect on the debt, take phone calls, and even potentially take you to court to pay the debt.
So you think what's happening with the economy is feeding into this trend? Is there anything else uniquely being done that could be feeding this as well?
Yeah, I think it's just an indicator of prolonged period of inflation, high cost of living, high housing expenses. We see that about nearly half of the people contacting us now are millennials. The student loans have gone back into repayment, which affects that generation significantly. High cost of living. So I think there's just a number of unique financial pressures placed on that demographic right now, and that as a result, some debts are falling past due, and then you see more collection calls, and then you see more complaints to the Federal Trade Commission about collections. There are limitations as to how a debt collector can contact you. You can't be abused or called in the middle of the night. They can't threaten to send the police to your house, that sort of thing. So you do need to understand your rights and your responsibilities when dealing with debt. But they are allowed to call. So we're seeing that reflected in the complaints to the Federal Trade Commission.
Gotcha. You mentioned all those things, the threats, they can't do that, can't do this. Have you gotten more complaints or more lawsuits as a result of this?
Well, they are allowed to sue you for a debt, right? And the worst thing you can do is ignore a summons for a debt that you're being sued for. Because if you don't show up, they'll get a default judgment, right? And then that's that. You really want to respond, try to reach a settlement agreement before it goes to court, or at least show up at court and explain why you've been unable to pay and try to reach a settlement at court. You definitely don't want to just ignore the debt and have that go outstanding. It's a really good opportunity to settle. You obviously have to have the money to settle, so it's a good idea to try to save up a little bit of money over time and then offer them maybe half of how much you owe. See if you can't get that settled in order to consider it resolved.
All right, Thomas, thanks so much for giving us that insight. Really appreciate it. Next time the phone rings, I guess a lot of people just won't answer, huh?
That's true. That's true, yeah.
What's going to happen, man. All right. Thanks a lot, Thomas. Really appreciate it. All right, speaking about money, right, we're going to explain coming up why buy now, pay later may become a nasty financial trap. This is The Take. We're back right after this. Americans are using that buy now, pay later service to stretch out their budgets, but that convenience may be leading to long-term financial pain. You may be feeling it. Joining us now is Professor Morgan Ward, who recently lectured at Emory University. Morgan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, talk to me about these deferred payments and how quickly they can snowball into accelerated debt. What do shoppers need to know before they click that pay later button?
Oh, that it's just so easy to get lured into it, because it's just like the classic kind of, we can just separate this up into 4 easy payments, and all of a sudden this large payment that felt really big and overwhelming, you can pay in 4 smaller ones, and you sort of forget how expensive the product is originally. So it's easy to start using it for things that you would normally not have bought. And then because it's so fragmented, people forget how many of them they've opted into. So it's really pretty dangerous, actually.
I've seen these when I'm online shopping, after I put some stuff in my cart or whatever, and when I go to check out, it'll say, hey, make 4 easy payments. Do they check your credit or anything like that? Or is it just a matter of hitting that button and they got you?
They check your credit initially, and then you opt in, but then it's actually a ding on your credit later. Even if you fully pay these off, it's a red flag for credit agencies. So just having one is bad for your credit.
Wow, didn't know that at all.
I didn't either.
Good message right there. Don't use that. All right. So a lot of us are now streaming, and sometimes that can even go sky high. Thank goodness 11Alive Plus is free. But how can people make sure they're not getting duped?
Well, there's a few ways. We used to think that this was going to be much cheaper because we were paying for cable, but it turns out to be so much more expensive. So the best ways to do it are to make sure that you're keeping these in your budget. So you're checking all of the streaming services. They're so easy to opt into. And so once a year, kind of check through all of those streaming services, and also try to use the bundled services so that you're not paying a little bit here and a little bit there. And also don't forget that these services increase in price almost every year. So what started out as pretty cheap ends up getting really expensive.
That's absolutely right. What about those forgotten subscriptions? I know I had a couple when my sons were going to school. I had a scholarship app, and I couldn't remember what was withdrawing this money, and it wound up being that app. Talk to us about that.
Well, people say to do a yearly audit on yourself, and actually some banks actually help you do that. But I've seen that at least $200 per family goes forgotten every year on just subscriptions we've opted into and forgotten to cancel. So it really is sort of one of those creeping expenses that people forget they have. You're right.
Got to do that audit. Got to do the audit. All right, artificial intelligence now entering more into our daily routine. Now that's helping us to pick out what we're buying?
Yeah, that's right. So something like 58% of shoppers globally have tried using ChatGPT for shopping, and essentially having the ChatGPT give us information and help us make better choices.
Is AI now outpacing things like Google and Yahoo when we go to searches? Is that now becoming the case?
It's not outpacing, but it's increasing so much more rapidly than those. It was something like a 1,200% increase in people using ChatGPT or large language models to do their shopping. And these tend to be for products that are easy to shop for, like people are willing to do it for dog food or groceries, not so much like buy me a new sweater. People aren't trusting it with those more sort of identity relevant products.
Gotcha. All right. Morgan, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight as always.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, have a great day. All right, folks, don't go anywhere. Coming up on the show, how one Atlanta officer's reaction led to lives being saved. We'll talk about it right after the break. Welcome back. Now, he was off duty, grabbing some lunch when chaos erupted in one of Atlanta's busiest food courts. Now, instead of running from the danger, Officer Lamar Jacobs ran toward the danger. He stopped the shooter even before anyone was killed. And now, 1 year later, he's sharing his story right here on 11Alive with Caitlin Ross. Caitlin joins us now. And Caitlin, this must have been an emotional interview.
Incredibly. Officer Jacobs says this was such a shock. He was working off duty, doing a security job. He was on a break, just eating lunch. He said he was eating a salad, trying to be healthy, do something for himself. And when he first heard the noise, he didn't even recognize that it was gunshots because it was so out of control. People started yelling, screaming, and he says his instincts just kicked in. He ran immediately towards the shooter.
I understand he managed to arrest the shooter himself as well?
Yes, there was a standoff. He asked the shooter repeatedly, put down your weapon, put down your weapon. He said in his head he was thinking, I don't want to shoot this dude. I don't want to do this. He had never actually drawn his weapon in that type of setting before. So he says the entire thing was shocking. But when it came down to it, the suspect started shooting at him and he had to fire back. He was over 100 feet away and ended up hitting the man in the leg, preserving his life and then arresting him.
Wow, this just has to weigh heavily on him. How has it been for him last year?
That's such a good question, Chesley, because he says it's been really hard. Obviously, everybody calls him a hero. He is a hero. He was invited to the nation's capital to give a speech, talk about his heroism. But he says he really has suffered in the past year with PTSD, second-guessing himself, thinking, could I have done something differently? Before he encountered the suspect, 3 people were shot. There's nothing he could have done about that. But he thinks, you know, if I had acted sooner, if I had heard it sooner, could I have done something to help protect them? Thankfully, everyone involved in this survived. Both the 3 victims and the shooter all survived. But Officer Jacobs says he replays that moment over and over again. He has 2 small children, and he says he can't go out in public anymore without immediately looking everywhere. He says his head is constantly on a swivel, just wondering what could happen next.
I can only imagine. What does he hope people take away from the day this happened?
So he says he wants people to understand that Atlanta police is really here to protect and serve, with a heavy emphasis on the serve. He says he's always been a community-minded officer that sought to build relationships in the community. He never wanted to be an enforcer. He really wanted to be someone who worked with the community to build bridges and to make connections. And he says he can't do his job without the support of the community. So he says he's always been really grateful for the support that he's had in and around Atlanta. And he doesn't want people to see the story and think about the medal he received. He wants people to think about the mission of the Atlanta police to protect and serve.
Wow. Do we know what happened with the person that was charged in this case?
Yeah, they ended up taking a plea deal, serving 10 years in prison. And he says he didn't really follow the case closely. He just kind of trusted that the justice system was going to work because it was too hard for him to dial back into that that moment. And he says he really just hopes that the victims are healing really well and moving on with their lives.
You mentioned that he doesn't look at himself as a hero, but everybody else does. Is it still surprising to him that people are kind of hailing him as a hero?
Yeah, he says he was just astounded. He went to Washington, D.C. to receive that medal, Officer of the Year. And he says it was so humbling. A detail that I really love about this is that he brought his mom to the ceremony. And when he talked about his mom got a standing ovation. And that's because right after this shooting, when police are involved in shootings, they're immediately kind of quarantined from everything else, taken away from everyone else while police conduct their independent investigation. And the first phone call he made was to his mom, because he says you're running through everything that happened, you're second guessing yourself, and he just wanted to hear his mom's voice. And he says in that moment she didn't go full mom on him. She just kind of said, was it a clean shooting? Were you in the clear? You're okay. And just reassured him, you are okay. You did the right thing. You protected lives. You saved the day. And so more than all of the public response, he says the validation from his mom has meant more than anything. And so I love that he brought his mom to that ceremony and that the other police officers in the room recognized that his mom stepped up that day too.
Absolutely. You know, we don't think of police officers as being human, right? They carry around guns. We think they know how to use them. They're trained and so on and so on. But they're human too. You're human too. You heard the story. You're in deep on this story. How are you feeling about it?
You know, I just am so impressed with the way that he has taken all of this on. He's a really young officer. He'd only been on the job for 2 years when this happened. Like I said, he had never drawn his service weapon before. So to be in a situation with that much heat, that much scrutiny, that much intensity, and still walk away from it and want to continue with the mission, he's a really impressive guy. I think you're going to want to see the whole story.
We do want to see this whole story, and thank you for bringing it to us. You can see Caitlin's full story tonight at 11 on 11 Live News at 6 and right here on 11 Live Plus and WATL. All right, earlier this month, an Atlanta Department of Transportation announced it's going to install more of those micro mobile corrals to help give more convenient areas for bikes and scooter parking. Yeah, you know how they lay all over the place, right? So they're going to make it a little bit more convenient. Here now to talk more about it with us is Ashley Finch. She's the micro mobile coordinator for the City of Atlanta Department of Transportation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
All right. Talk to me about how popular these scooters and e-bikes have become here in the metro Atlanta area.
Yeah, the e-scooters and e-bikes, the shareable ones, are extremely popular. We've seen exponential growth year over year, and we're up over 50% year over year growth this year. So we were at 2.6 million trips last year, and we're just growing more and more this year. So extremely popular.
Nice. Where are these corrals? Where are they going to be located?
Yeah, so we typically look for areas where we have a lot of parking demand for e-scooters and e-bikes. So that's both personal and shared. And so we have the data from the shared devices to know where people are parking them. And then we actually crowdsource our City of Atlanta residents where they wanted more bike and scooter parking. So we look at all that data, and typically it's in the areas you would expect, our busy areas off the Beltline, areas near business districts. So we really just look at where is the parking needed, what's the data telling us, and sometimes we have requests from business owners as well.
So the community gave their input and you guys decided to go from there.
Exactly.
Okay, there you go. Is it around a lot of schools? Seems like a lot of students, for example, down at Georgia State would use these to get around.
Yes, definitely. So, we talked to Georgia Tech, Georgia State, all of our universities. And so some of them are doing the parking themselves. They're adding some corrals, but where we can add some additional, we like to do that as well.
We understand that you got a grant from the AARP of Georgia.
Yes.
Does that signal that maybe some of the more seasoned folks in our community are going to start using these?
So it's a little bit of, we would love for that to happen, and we're having more form factors that people of all ages and abilities can ride. But also one of the things the corrals offer is some safety improvements. So what we're actually doing is pairing them near crosswalks to prevent drivers from illegally parking and blocking crosswalks. And this is called intersection daylighting. And basically, if we are able to put some infrastructure near that crosswalk and prevent a car from parking there, it makes pedestrians a lot more visible when they cross the street. And a lot of our seniors, they may need a little extra time to cross the street. So just giving them more visibility for other motorists can help reduce crashes up to 30%.
Gotcha. All right. So before the corrals, right, we would see people just kind of leave them on the sidewalk, kind of like you said, just kind of leave them wherever they are. What kind of awareness are you going to get out to the public about where they can now park these vehicles?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So it is legal to park them on the sidewalk, but sometimes the sidewalks are a little too narrow, or people may park them in a curb ramp that, creates some ADA issues. And so this is just an opportunity to have the public have a little more space, usually in the street, to park them and get them off the sidewalk. And we're putting them all in the apps. So Lime and Bird are operators in Atlanta. And so when you're parking near one of the corrals, it will show up in their app and tell you to park in there. And usually there's a little picture. We're adding signage to make the public more aware that this is the appropriate place to park. And we're hoping to eventually do some ones that are more artistic with paint, make them really vibrant. So we're just trying to make them as visible as possible.
Sounds good, Ashley Finch. Really appreciate all the insight, and hopefully that'll kind of make it a little bit cleaner to walk on downtown streets along with those scooters and bikes. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Don't go anywhere, folks. We got much more show for you coming up right after the break. Well, welcome back to the show. Seems like Wall Street's rally may be cooling off. CNN's Maribel Aber joins us now from the NASDAQ marketplace in New York City there. Good morning, Maribel. Tell us why investors are shifting gears after such a hot streak.
Hey, good morning, Chesley. Well, after a powerful recent rally that took the S&P 500 back near its record high, stocks have cooled off, as you mentioned there. Wall Street is now waiting for some word from London on how the U.S.-China trade talks are going and whether any deal can be struck. There are a couple big inflation reports due out over the next few days. Tomorrow, we'll get a look at consumer prices, and then on Friday, we'll have a gauge that tracks prices on the wholesale level. Between the two, we'll have a pretty good look at what type of pricing pressures industries are seeing lately. So a lot for Wall Street to work with over the next several days. And trading is just underway this morning, Chesley. Right now, it looks like the Dow's kind of unchanged. Here at NASDAQ, we're up about 51 points. The S&P up 11.
Good to know right there. All right, the United States and China are back at the negotiating table, but could this be the breakthrough that global markets have been waiting for?
That's the hope as trade talks between the U.S. and China resume today for a second straight day in London. The two sides met yesterday in an effort to agree on Chinese exports of rare earth minerals and other items. The minerals are crucial to a number of industries, including autos and electronics. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick are among those meeting with Chinese officials, and the two sides are looking to build on negotiations in Geneva last month. Those resulted in a 90-day suspension of most of the more than 100% tariffs the two countries had imposed on each other. Late yesterday, President Trump was asked how these current talks were going. He said, quote, "We are doing well with China. China's not easy." Chesley, both sides are expected to issue updates on the talks later today.
Gotcha. Maribel, last week we talked about the push for more data centers, especially right here in the metro Atlanta. But now Amazon has its sight on another state for one more of these facilities, right?
It does. Amazon says it will invest $20 billion to build artificial intelligence data centers in rural Pennsylvania. There will be two centers. One will be built right alongside a nuclear power plant. That one will be next to the Susquehanna nuclear power plant, which is where the data center intends to get its power. So we've seen a lot of tech companies partnering with nuclear power operators to secure all the energy needed for these AI data centers. The second Amazon data center will be on the site of what was once a U.S. steel mill. And Amazon said that data center will get its power through the electricity grid. Pennsylvania's governor called it the largest private sector investment in the state's history. The state is also working with Amazon on additional data center projects. Now, these data centers required a huge number of construction jobs to build them, and they can also generate strong tax revenues for local governments, Chesley.
Everybody gets excited, Maribel, when Apple makes an announcement. Yesterday was all about Apple. What is the company planning to roll out now?
Okay, Apple has unveiled its major software updates at the company's Worldwide Developers Conference. And among those is a technology, they call it liquid glass. The new design will feature see-through visuals on iPhones that appear to have this sort of glossy surface. Apple's also bringing real-time language translation to calls, text, and FaceTime. There'll also be an iPhone spam detection feature. Spam detection will slot unknown message senders into a separate queue until you approve them. Apple also promised to have an update later this year on a smarter, more useful artificial intelligence enhanced version of Siri it's been working on. Chesley, imagine how handy that language translation comes on vacation, or for some, what your mother-in-law is really saying.
Oh, sign me up. Maribel, are you Android or Apple?
I'm Apple. There's like 8 devices right here, Chesley.
And they're all Apple, right? All Apple. And I'm an Android guy myself. But it seems like, after Apple, announces their stuff, we catch up a little bit, right? We get there.
You do. You get excited about the tech.
I'll let you pay the high price first, and then we'll come in on the cheaper side.
Okay.
Maribel, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
You got it.
All right. After the break, a new vision for bringing the Georgia Tech campus closer to the rest of Atlanta. This is The Take. We'll have that story for you coming up after the break. All right, welcome back to the show. It's where science meets storytelling and engineers share space with artists. Georgia Tech's launching a bold new vision, one that reimagines how creativity fuels innovation. Here to share more with us is Professor Jason Freeman. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, let's talk about this creative quarter, right? And what inspired its formation?
Well, Georgia Tech has always been a place where the arts have thrived, where students create art of all different kinds, everything ranging from video games to movies to playing in the orchestra or singing in the choir is an important part of who they are in their development here at Georgia Tech. We think that this is the right moment to really lean into supporting the growing creative economy here in the state of Georgia, the growth of all these creative industries that are an incredibly important part of what Georgia is and what we want to become. Particularly at this moment where technology is becoming such an important part of how we create and experience art.
You talked about what it is we are to become. How does this vision align with Georgia Tech's strategic goals?
So Georgia Tech has always been focused on these innovation districts on the edges of our campus, places where we can really support and cultivate and grow economies in particular areas that are important to tech and our students and our faculty, but also important to the state. So we've seen this happen with Technology Square over the last 2 decades. We've also seen it happen with Science Square, which just launched its first phase just over a year ago, focus on life sciences and biotech. And so really the vision of the Creative Quarter is to do the same thing, but in this space of arts, creativity, technology, and innovation.
How large of a space are we talking about here, and what's significant behind the spaces coming together?
It's about 7 acres, and it's an incredible parcel of land. It's right on the southwest corner of our campus, right in an area that's incredibly accessible, very close to the downtown tourist and entertainment district, very close to the burgeoning creative artists and organizations on the west side of Atlanta and the communities out there, and also very close to the center of our campus, just across the street from our student center, our first center for the performing arts, and our central campus green, Tech Green.
I guess technically you are a city campus. Does this help you kind of blend in with the community even more?
Absolutely. I think historically, when we started with Tech Square, we were really focused on the east side of Atlanta and growing our presence in the Midtown Business District. And really with our moves with Science Square and now with the Creative Quarter, we're really looking to the west of campus and what we can do to increase our connections to the west side communities right by us.
Talk to me about the students that this will have an impact on. Obviously, I'm sure you wanted to impact all students, but mainly you got art majors, obviously engineering majors. Is it to lend a hand to all students, and how will that be done?
Yeah, so it's very much for all students. Students, whether they're majoring in computer science or aerospace engineering or business or whatever, or architecture, have an incredible passion for the arts when they come to our campus, and continuing to participate in the arts and find these experiences is an important part of their finding a sense of belonging and community, and really finding a way to express themselves as students and continue that development that propels hopefully through their entire lifetimes. It's also a really important way to help develop leaders, no matter what field they go into, who can thrive and be flexible and talk and collaborate across disciplines and deal with these kind of wicked hard problems that we're facing today. But at the same time, we're also continuing to grow some specific academic programs that are really focused on creative industries. So we have existing flagship programs in areas like music technology and digital media. And in the coming years, we'll be launching a new undergraduate degree program that really focuses on areas like technology and entrepreneurship as they connect to film, television, and gaming.
Yeah. What does success look like? Tell me, after a year we have this, what's going to be your ultimate wave the flag, we did it?
Well, it's a long road. We've been developing Tech Square for more than 2 decades, like I said. So in the short term, we're really looking to start doing some events on the site and bring artists onto the site and really start building a brand and a strong identity for Georgia Tech at this intersection of arts and technology that activates it for our campus and for the community. In the longer term, we're looking at commercial development that include anything from hotels and housing, dining and retail, to office facilities and specialized arts facilities that really help attract major companies to locate here in Georgia because they want to be near Georgia Tech and they want to be part of this new community.
Do you see this spreading to other campuses?
Absolutely. We're part of a large ecosystem in arts and technology here in the state of Georgia, and our partnerships with other higher education institutions are really critical in building a large ecosystem that supports the full set of talent needs that the industry has here.
Yeah, can't wait to see it myself. Sounds good. Professor Jason Friedman, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for the insights today.
My pleasure.
All right. Plenty more stories ahead, folks. This is The Take. 11Alive Plus. We're back right after this. All right, there will be some impacts this afternoon as we are anticipating more thunderstorms to pop up. Now, not as widespread, but there'll be some isolated showers and thunderstorms that will be around. In fact, in those isolated showers will be embedded thunderstorms. Some of those, few of those, could be on the strong to severe side. Our window for that will be from 1 o'clock this afternoon to about 7 o'clock this evening. After 7 o'clock, a lot of that starts to fade down to the south. Keep the umbrella handy, folks. You're going to need that rain gear if you're going to be out and about. We're looking at temperatures today getting up to about 85 degrees. We will get some sunshine in. Clouds are already starting to break down, and so we'll get some sunshine in. That's just going to add to the instability. Got a front that's going to be making its way through the area. Now, we are really hoping that this front moves a little bit further to the south of us by tonight. That means drier air will work its way into our area by Wednesday. Now, if that front gets hung up on us or hung up over us, well, that means that 20% that you see there on Wednesday will start to go up. And we don't want that. 88 degrees will be the high temperature on Wednesday with only a 20% chance of rain and more sunshine. It'll be a hot day. 87 degrees for the high on Thursday, 30% chance for the rain. It comes back to us, folks, so the dry air doesn't stick around. In fact, our percentage for rain will be going up right on through and into the weekend. 50% chance for rain by the time we get to Saturday, Sunday, a 40% chance. Yep, we remain unsettled even as we head into next week with scattered showers and thunderstorms mainly during the afternoons, and temperatures will remain in the 80s, folks, mid to upper 80s, that will hang around. All right, before we go, I want to give you my final take. A zebra, yep, is being the talk of the town, or I should say the talk of the country, after a number of memes have been popping up on social media. Ed the zebra was captured after being on the run for a little over a week. Authorities finally caught the striped animal in a field in Christina, Tennessee. That's about 45 miles south of Nashville. Authorities airlifted, as you can see, the zebra back to its owners. The pet, that's right, the pet belonged to a couple that told law enforcement that they obtained the zebra on a Friday night and then it escaped the following day. So many questions come to mind about this, and I'll only share with you two thoughts that I have. First of all, who has a pet zebra? And why would you want a pet zebra? Apparently, it's legal in Tennessee to do so. It's also legal to have a chinchilla, giraffes, also kangaroos as pets in the state. That needs to change. All right. Number two, zebras are like horses. They have trailers. They make trailers to transport them around. Why would you air flight a zebra? You know what I think it is? A case of animal shaming, so that the other animals, when they see the zebra in the air, they won't try to escape. They'll be too embarrassed to be swung around in front of their friends. Like, I don't know why they're doing this to me. Ed won't think about escaping again, or he air flighted over his friends being swung around getting dizzy, you know? By the way, it is legal to own a zebra as a pet here in Georgia. Don't do it. That's all we got for you today, folks. Make it a great one. Encourage someone not to get a zebra as a pet.